Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers postgame reaction show. Just got back from Crypto.com Arena, where the Lakers fell 126-102 to the San Antonio Spurs, dropping them to 20-17. It is their third straight loss. They have lost 4 of 6 overall. They fell to number 7 in the Western Conference, and it's a tricky situation. I'm not gonna lie. Like it's tough to divorce the last week from some of the basketball we saw tonight. And I'm going to do my best to parse through it and try to give the team some grace while also being critical and objective with some of the things that went wrong, some of the things that have been going wrong for this group for the last few games and really this stretch since they made the trade and as they try to find a new identity with this group. But I'm going to do my best. It's going to be difficult, but I'm going to try and find the right balance. It was something I've been thinking a lot about as I prepared for tonight's show. But before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. What is up, everyone in the chat? I see you guys starting to populate. Shout out to the late night gang. And so first thing for me is going to be the overarching takeaway of the game. And this is where I want to be clear that I want to give the Lakers some grace with this situation and with the outcome tonight. They had not played basketball officially in a game capacity in almost a week. They had last played on Tuesday night in Dallas. So it had been 6 days. They had 3 consecutive days of get what you need / film sessions. So not really official practices, not like hard scrimmaging. And I think there was a clear element of rust, but then you also have to factor in the human element of their coach had his house burned down, and several members of the organization had their houses burned down or family members' houses burned down. Several players had to evacuate, including Anthony Davis, who shared that post game that he could see flames coming above the hill outside his backyard. He had a picture of it, and he had to evacuate on Friday as the Palisades fire continued to spread. And just from the initial area, just been spreading. It's at like over 20,000 acres right now. So that element of this is just something that it's hard to calculate how much of a mental toll the past week has taken on the Lakers, and might not be on everybody, but certainly that's a factor here. And I'm not using it as an excuse, but I also don't want to completely ignore it either, right? So I'm trying to find that balance of how much grace to give this group in their first game back. To me, it primarily applies to this game in particular, and I don't think, I mean, of course, we'll see what happens with the fire, so I don't want to make any absolute statements, but barring a new fire or new situation where people have to evacuate and there's more destruction and harm and more that they have to deal with, I think moving forward, it's focusing on basketball, focusing on how the team is performing. But in my opinion, and everyone's entitled to their opinion, I'm sure there's some people in the chat that or people that have their own shows that aren't going to feel the same way, and that's okay. But for me, being there at practice, seeing JJ respond the way that he responded, seeing the guys galvanize around him, being there pregame, being in the locker room, it's just you can feel the weight of this situation around the team, and I think that had a role in tonight's outcome. And they were up by 9 at halftime, tied going into the fourth, and then completely collapse and have a tough fourth quarter, to put it kindly. But for me, I don't want to overreact to this loss. I will say that to me, it confirmed some of the things that, like, it was almost a continuation of the Houston and Dallas games. That there was, in terms of too much switching, guys getting targeted, teams kind of pushing them around in the paint. I think like in critical moments, LA not being able to generate high percentage looks, but also not being able to get stops. I think that the starting lineup continues to need a different look. I think the rotation needs a different look. And there are certainly some bigger picture changes that I think need to happen with this group. But for tonight, this outcome, I do want to give the group some grace. I do want to acknowledge that they've had a tragic, sad, just horrific week. And these guys are human. And again, multiple players had to evacuate. That's something that's going to weigh on you when you're facing potentially losing your home, potentially losing all your possessions. And like it's a serious thing. So again, I'm going to touch on basketball stuff. And I just wanted to kind of preface this all. My overarching thought is I'm not going to overreact to this loss and this performance, them laying a dud in the fourth. But I think it does confirm some of the things we'd already been seeing with this group again for a couple of weeks now. Stat of the night is really, it's take your pick, because I look at 13 points in the fourth quarter for the Lakers. I look at 73 points allowed in the second half for the Lakers, 37 points allowed in the fourth quarter, and just 13 points scored, but 40 points in the second half for LA. So really, I guess I would say the second half margin of being outscored 73-40, similar to parts of the Houston game when they were down by 22 in the first half, similar to, I want to say it was actually a very similar margin with Dallas, of Dallas outscoring them, I want to say off the top of my head, something like 73-47 from like the final, over the final 27 minutes of that game. Like they just got shellacked in the second half. And that to me was like just them looking that lost on both sides of the ball and really underperforming on both sides of the ball to that extent. Pick your number. You want to go with 13, you want to go with 37, you want to go with 73, you want to go with 40. Pick your number. I guess the other one that stands out, of course, is the turnovers. 19 turnovers tonight. They had 6 in the first quarter, which I felt really set the tone for the evening. But they were a high turnover team all night. They had 15 going into the fourth. So I think the turnovers were a big factor. And then 3 takeaways. I'm going to kind of go through these quickly. I'm going to do a little bit of a shorter show tonight. Going to go about 45, 50 minutes and then wrap. I will be doing another episode of Buha's Block tomorrow. And then I'll also be doing some Spectrum going on Spectrum tomorrow night. So got a busy day tomorrow that I want to, make sure I have enough energy and time to prepare. So takeaway number 1 for me is going to be the Lakers have to reduce their switching. And this has been a season-long issue for them, going back to right before they made the shift to being more of a drop team, more of a coverage team, as JJ likes to say when he discusses the defensive strategy. And we saw there for a stretch of about 11, 12 games, they were performing like a top 10 defense for most of that stretch. And yes, LeBron was out for a little bit. The end of it was like the DFS trade. And there was certainly some some of those opponents weren't good offensively or just weren't good teams. There were a lot of factors that led to them being a better defense for an extended period. But in my opinion, the biggest one was the shift defensively in terms of being more of a coverage team versus being more of a switch everything team. And you saw that when LA was able to not switch as much, they were able to keep AD closer to the rim, keep him more in the paint. and live with the results of making teams more jump shot heavy. And that has been something that it's been a bit of a push and pull with them this season, because more recently, these last 3 games in particular, they have shifted more to switching again. And we've seen they've gone 0-3. And I don't think it's quite that simple, but I do think there's a compounding effect where, especially if Dorian isn't going to be starting, I don't think the starting lineup is good enough defensively to run that base scheme. And I think it gets them in a little bit of a hole to start the first and third quarters. And then you start to bring in these defensive minded guys like Gabe, like Cam, like DFS, but that those groups, sometimes struggle offensively. And it's a lot of like, can LeBron, if it's a LeBron centric bench unit, or AD and Austin kind of bail the group out and create everything? That also bleeds into the potential need for another playmaker, which is a separate issue that I will touch on tomorrow. But to me, I think one simple fix is like they got to go back to playing more coverage. And yes, that's going to put more defensive responsibility on Austin. That's going to put more defensive responsibility on Rui. That's going to put more defensive responsibility on LeBron and even AD, depending on the team, the matchup, etc. But right now, the switching scheme, teams are just bringing AD out and getting him away from the basket. And then they're targeting Austin or Rui. Harrison Barnes scored over Max by shouldering him in the chest. Even like Cam and I felt like Gabe, like even some of their better defenders got targeted and scored on. And San Antonio isn't like Devin Vassell and Stefan Castle are both athletic, explosive guards, and we saw that tonight. They finished over AD. They're getting offensive rebounds, and they were a problem. But it wasn't just them. It was Harrison Barnes. It was Keldon Johnson. Even Julian Champagny. Like they just had a bunch of guys who were able to attack the Lakers off the dribble. That was to say nothing of Victor Wembanyama and how brilliant he was and just all the problems that he caused. But San Antonio really exploited the Lakers on the perimeter. That's a sentence that I have uttered on here how many times now throughout the season. Like LA just really struggles when they play a group that has more athleticism and force and physicality on the perimeter. And I get in theory why they have leaned on switching as hard as they have. I think it's in part to protect some of their weaker defenders and not be as physically taxing. But I just think it compounds. Right now, I think it's the scheme plus some of the lineups and the rotation are compounding into becoming the mess that we've seen the last 3 games. And that to me, like the biggest thing from this is that they have to get back to being more of a coverage team, switching less. And I think it's time to start DFS over Rui. I think Rui makes more sense with the bench units and having him be one of those ancillary scores or even featured scores, depending on the lineup or point in the game. But I would move Rui to the back. I mean, I've already said that now a couple episodes, but I think it's time. It's beyond time to move Dorian into the starting lineup. Takeaway number 2 is just going to be a quick one on Jarred Vanderbilt. We got an update from JJ pregame that Vando right now the issue that they're kind of coming up against is they're trying to get him some lower stakes live action. So he has gone up against coaches. He was practicing with the G League, and they wanted him playing against some of those guys because the Lakers are playing every other day the rest of the week. They aren't going to be doing live action during practices. So the thing that they're trying to figure out is how they can get Vando those live action reps before he ultimately returns. So JJ said that he is close, he is progressing, but he will not be back this week. By my deductive reasoning, that means next week at the earliest. I guess early next week could be the soonest that Vando comes back. But based on the way he was talking about it, sounds like it could potentially be even longer. And as we're coming up, we're about 3 weeks away from the trade deadline, the Lakers obviously have some important decisions to make in terms of where Vando fits into their future, if that makes a guy like Rui potentially expendable, what the rotation looks like, what the lineups look like, what their strengths and weaknesses are as a group. So that's a pretty big domino that has yet to fall in terms of Vando coming back. And we got another update, and it sounds like it's not a setback, but in terms of taking that next step in his progression, he has not been able to take that yet. And that does, I think, give some concern with, again, the trade deadline being about 3 weeks and a couple days away. If the Lakers are going to have enough of a sample size to really make a decision in factoring Vando in, or if they're going to just have to blindly make a decision in either direction. And that could, could be betting on Vando and you potentially trade someone and then that backfires, or it could be not having the trust in Vando and then you don't make the move. And then ultimately there's kind of like a rotation squeeze and you kind of wish you pulled the trigger and made a different move. So that's going to be something to track over the next week or so. But JJ said he's not going to be back this week. The Lakers have 3 more games this week. So it sounds like Vando will not be playing in at least the next 3 games. And then final one is the highlight of the night, which was Michael Cooper's jersey retirement. No one puts on a jersey retirement quite like the Lakers. One of the cool things as a media member, as a beat writer covering the team, is we get to go on the floor for these events. So at halftime, there's the Michael Cooper jersey retirement, and they bring us, we had this special yellow armband, and we got brought on the floor, and we were right there, 10 feet from Magic Johnson, Pat Riley, the whole Showtime group, as they're introducing Coop, and the crowd's yelling Coop, and like, just that's one of the coolest experiences I've had covering basketball, is being able to go, like, because we go on the court pregame and we get to watch the guys warm up, and we're obviously in the locker room, and like you get desensitized to being that close to LeBron and JJ and AD and like all these guys from being there at practices and on the road and all that stuff. But being on the court, actually, like while the arena is full and all eyes are on the floor, that's just a different experience. And that's just something that the Lakers, I think they do a really good job honoring their history, honoring their past, celebrating it. And it was a great ceremony. And it was unfortunate for the Lakers that it was spoiled by the outcome of the game in the fourth quarter and the Spurs. But like, I will say this, and I hope I don't get in trouble for sharing this, but there's that patio in the sort of the bowels of the arena where a lot of the celebrities and people kind of sitting in certain sections of the arena can go and grab a drink, grab some food, whatever. And like, pretty sure there was a after party going on for Coop and the Showtime group. And I will say I heard it after the game, like sort of after the buzzer. And then I heard it well after, an hour plus post game and writing and transcribing and stuff. And they were still going hard. We'll just leave it there. So the Showtime group knows how to party, and despite the outcome of the game, they were still making the most of it and celebrating Coop. So could not see what was going on, but could just hear and playing loud music and having a blast. So that was like the highlight of the night for me. What was just seeing that and just obviously I was born in 92, so I did not watch Showtime live. I've only seen the highlights and tried to study it as a basketball historian myself. But seeing that group, seeing again, I mean, I've seen Magic before, but that was probably the closest out. I mean, Pat Riley, I guess I've seen at several jersey retirements, but like just seeing the group together, that there's something that's nostalgic and sentimental about that. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. I see we got some questions. Let's get into it. I don't know. It's very hot in here. Deshaun Hamilton, I forgot Lakers had 6 days off, by the way, so they could not use fatigue issue. Now, you can't use the fatigue issue, but what you can use is the rust issue. And you sometimes see this like when a team sweeps in the playoffs and they have like 4 or 5 days or even upwards of like a week plus off, they are rusty that game one in the next series because there's nothing like playing every other day or so. Like sometimes it is nice to have a bit of a break. 6 days is a long time. And I think a lot of the turnovers they had tonight were directly related to some of the just rust and being out of rhythm that they were facing. So again, I'm not making excuses. I'm trying to find the balance again, because I do think like there's a human element here that we can't overlook, or at least I'm not going to overlook. But certainly they were sloppy tonight. And I think that traces back to them not having played a game in almost a week and not even really practice. Like, because I mean, JJ shared pregame that there was one player who lives in Encino who got boxed in because of the evacuations and the fire and wasn't even able to make it to practice. Like they didn't have a path to get to practice. So like that was the type of stuff that these guys were dealing with behind the scenes over the last few days. And it's just, I don't know how you quantify that. Like, I don't think these guys are robots as much as maybe fans in the team would like them to be robots who can just completely block out all the noise and go out there and, you know, just dominate the Spurs and beat them by 20. Like, that's just not the reality of the situation. So again, I'm trying to find the balance with excuses versus criticism and, or not, you know, with grace versus criticism, I should say. But I will say that they've had a lot of these issues for a while. So it's not like tonight was just sort of a worse version of some of their bad habits. Karush, Bruce Brown trade looks better every day. I mean, this is partly why I'm a fan of a potential Bruce Brown trade. What I think, I'm going to touch on the trade stuff a little bit more tomorrow in terms of like what I think the group needs, but I really look at that Cam Reddish, Gabe Vincent, Dalton Connect portion of the rotation, and it just kind of feels like that's the part of the rotation that needs to be upgraded, in addition to the backup center spot. Now, I think it might just be as simple as Christian Wood potentially gets healthy at some point and he just takes those minutes, or Christian Koloko eventually gets converted to a roster spot and he takes those minutes. Jackson Hayes has just not been good since returning. Now, again, with him, like, he missed over a month. He missed like 20, I think it was 20 of 21 games. So there is going to be an element of rust and lack of rhythm with that. But he's had a little bit more time back. And I just don't think he's looked very good. So, I mean, to your point, like with Bruce Brown, I think if there's a way to flip Rui, it would almost certainly have to be Rui for him. And then you get Vando back. Now, all of a sudden, your athleticism within the rotation and slotting some of those other guys down a bit, I think just makes a lot more sense. But right now, I think they're just relying on guys who probably shouldn't be in the rotation on a serious team. And that's kind of their biggest issue right now. Sorry. Duster or Dustu R. Jovan, is it possible to get Bogdan from ATL? He would help us immediately. I mean, is it like, what's he making? I mean, he's been a guy who's been available in the past. I think that the one thing is like Atlanta has been competitive, so I don't necessarily see them just selling guys off. He's making 17.3, but he actually has a declining salary down to 16 next year, and then he has a 16 million team option the next year. So from a salary perspective, you could do it. You could do it with Rui if it's Rui and something, but maybe Rui in a second because you're shedding salary technically. Although I guess if you're Atlanta, you're adding salary next year, but then you don't have to make the team option decision with Bogdanovic. So it might just come down to how they view Rui and the front court or whatnot. But I would like him in terms of like he's better than I just mentioned Cam, Gabe, Dalton. He's better than those guys. He would add an element of playmaking and shooting. The defense, not great. And I also think it probably comes down to like maybe if you could do Gabe at 17 though, it's tough. Yeah, it's tough to not do that without including Rui, and I don't know how they feel about that. Dark Galaxy, Jovan, are you not concerned about this team's quitting habit? They quit versus Miami, Denver, Phoenix, etc. Other LA teams actually played hard for the city. That last part, it's tough to say. That I don't. Again, this is where I feel conflicted in terms of the evaluation. I don't want to say like they didn't play hard for the city. I think that might be a bit of an aggressive statement. However, to your points, you bring up Miami, Denver, Phoenix. I'd bring up Minnesota. I would bring up Dallas. I mean, just this last Dallas game, they have a bad, like that's why their point differential is so bad, is because a rough stretch or rough quarter spirals into them just getting blown out. And then they have all these close wins. And that's ultimately why they have a bad point differential, bad net rating. So yeah, I mean, it's certainly concerning. I guess I will, to directly answer your question, it is concerning. I think this team has lacked resiliency this year, and in a general sense, that there have been a lot of rollovers in second halves, and that I wouldn't put it as the most concerning thing, because I think the most concerning thing ultimately is just the roster and the amount of one-way guys they have. But that it's up there, because there are teams that have a bad quarter and bounce back with a great quarter, and you see a certain level of resilience. And this group, it feels like they've done it against some bad teams where they've been able to save a game. Like I think some of the Spurs games in the two Spurs games in San Antonio, I think that they showed some resilience in those, but that was also the Spurs. I don't think were playing as well as they have been recently. They were still kind of figuring themselves out, and it's still ultimately a team that I view as more like a borderline play-in team, just given the depth of the West. But the Lakers, like you're talking about, Miami at the time was in a better place, not a great place, but a better place than they're currently at. Denver just has their number. Phoenix was in a much better place at that time. So like at the time, those were good teams that they were playing that they just completely folded against in the second half. And I would throw in Dallas, I would throw in Minnesota. So they have some really bad losses in terms of final score and second halves and fourth quarters. And it is a concern. And I'm not quite sure what it stems from. I do feel like you got to look at multiple factors. Part of that has to fall at the feet of LeBron and AD as the two leaders of the group. Part of that has to fall on the coaching staff. I mean, the blame kind of goes all around. But when it's bad for the Lakers this year, it's been really bad. And the floor is very low for a team that has as high of aspirations as they have. And that ultimately might be, and it kind of combines what you're saying there, but like, the floor being as low as it has been at various points this season, to me, might be the most discouraging thing of all, because I think there are teams that have similar talent level, similar records, who just don't have as low of a floor as the Lakers. And on the flip side, like we've seen a very high ceiling from the Lakers at times, but the floor, I think, is what concerns me, because again, when things start to spiral, this group has tended to roll over in a way that you don't see from a championship level team. Gary Gutierrez, lineup's not working because guys are playing out of position, switch too much, and we have no foot speed. I would put two of those three things on the roster. I would put the switching too much. I think that's JJ's way of trying to solve some of the deficiencies and limitations with the roster, but that is something that he needs to correct and address and really look deeper in terms of the film and the overall strategy. But the first and third one, guys are playing out of position because there's a lot of overlap in terms of like they need, there's overlap at certain positions, and then there's also positions that they don't really have that they need guys to fill. So like they're playing, I mean, I think you could even make the case like DFS, who I would start over Rui. Rui, DFS, and LeBron are really, if you're just like building a team, those guys are all fours. DFS is capable of shifting down and playing the three and guarding threes. But if you're saying like what's DFS's natural position in 2025, it's a four. So if you look at it, AD is a five. Then they got the backup fives. LeBron's a four. Rui's a four. DFS is a four. Cam, really, I don't think is a rotation guy on a good team, but you know he's kind of a 2-3. I actually sometimes like Cam playing a bit down at the 2 and not having to rely on him as like a front court guy. Dalton is also similar 2-3 hybrid. Max is a 2. Austin's really more of a 2 than a 1, but he has shifted over to being a 1 and has done, you know, fairly well as a lead ball handler, playmaker, initiator. Gabe, it's more like a backup 2, I guess. So like just looking at it, I mean, they don't really have a traditional 3 in the traditional sense. And the point guard spot, like those are kind of the 2 holes on the roster, I guess, and also backup 5. So, I mean, those are the 3 holes that I continually talk about, is like another wing, a better backup, and potentially another ball handler, playmaker. I guess you could throw Shake Milton in there as like a backup guard, but I think it's more of a 2 than a 1. And then foot speed is just, that's a roster, like they just don't have much foot speed with this group. Laker fan for life. Jovan, thoughts on how the Kings are doing? They beat Boston, are on a 7-game winning streak with a new coach. Sometimes you just see this with teams and they play better with a new coach. And I mean, honestly, I think the Lakers kind of had some of this at the beginning of the season, right? No more Darvin, and they get off to that 10-4 start. But especially in the middle of a season, when you fire a coach that seemed to be losing the locker room or some of the locker room, whatever the case may be, I think you start to see better play. I still long-term don't fully trust the Kings, and I view them as like a low-end play-in team, but they're playing well. They beat Boston, to your point, and like for now, they've turned things around. I just think in the grand scheme of the West, unless they make a big trade, I'm still low on them. Gary Gutierrez, how do you feel about Levine, Jovan? My thoughts on Levine haven't changed. Really, the biggest hurdle, regardless of what I think, regardless of what the Lakers think, regardless of what the Bulls think in terms of like the Lakers guys, it's just hard to get to that salary. You have to give up Rui, Gabe, Vando, and that gets you even then to about 39, and you still probably have to give up 2 more guys. So you're trading 5 guys for Zach LaVine, and then Chicago has to figure out what they're doing, taking on 4 extra players. And then do you bring in a 3rd team, and then you got to attach more assets, and like it just gets very complicated to add that big of a salary. Kay Norris, hey Jovan, hope you're well and safe. If the Lakers acquired Bruce Brown, would you start him over Max? I would probably lean toward keeping Max in the starting lineup because of how well he's played in general and him being a longer term piece. And also, I think Bruce has some ball handling capabilities that you can kind of bring him in as a bit of like a secondary ball handler with bench groups. So for that, like I almost view him in a way as like an upgrade over Gabe, but could also play I guess offensively in that sense, but then defensively can play, you can plug and play him in multiple positions. I think I would just go DFS Max, keep it like that and bring Bruce off the bench. But I also know he's a veteran who's won a championship, that there is a seniority element sometimes to these things where maybe if the Lakers are pitching him on a roll and he says, I want to start, it's that simple of like, he's going to probably have more juice than Max in terms of just being a guy who's won a title and being a big part of a title team. So there's a chance that he comes in and starts, but personally, I would keep Max in the starting lineup. Is this Sagar? Yo, Jovan, mad respect, you're up so late. 2 p.m. India time would probably mean it is 2:30 a.m. It is 12:30 a.m. So not quite that late, but I will be up that late working and writing. Ron's key, Jovan, is Rui and Reeves really untouchable on possible trades? There's always a price that the Lake, there's always a player that the Lakers would be considering, or botching my words here, that the Lakers would consider moving those two for. I would put them on different tiers. I think Austin is on a higher tier in terms of the type of player. Like I've been saying it for 2 years now, and it's continued to, whether it was Kyrie, whether it was DeJounte Murray, Zach LaVine, like the Lakers have had a very high bar to trade Austin Reeves, and it's been like basically top 20 all-star type player, top 15 type all-star player. And if they could go get that third guy that's at that level and they have to put him in the trade, that's like when they would consider it. Otherwise, anyone else that is at a lower level, they're not considering trading Austin, as I've reported multiple times. So aggregators, please don't re-aggregate that. And then with Rui, it's a little bit more complicated. I do think there's a bit of a dissonance in terms of how high the Lakers are internally with Rui versus how the rest of the league views him versus how the rest of the fan base views him. I would say the Lakers are higher on Rui than the league, also partly based on the contract that they gave him. But then also, I think clearly the fan base, like I see it in the comments. I know fans are upset with Rui recently, and that's, I think, the popular trade candidate right now. But I think with Rui, it's not the same bar. I don't think it's like top 20 guy, but I think in their eyes that they view it as it would have to be a clear upgrade. So that's where the Bruce Brown one gets a little complicated, because it is someone that has been on their radar going back to the 2023 offseason, but do they view him as that much of an upgrade, if one at all, over Rui? That's the thing I think they're grappling with and trying to determine. And if it's not Bruce Brown, and let's say it's Gabe Vincent, then getting the matching salary is pretty difficult. You either have to put like 3 minimum guys in addition to Gabe Vincent, or you have to put in Vando. But then Toronto is going to ask for, I mean, if it's Gabe and Vando, they're going to want at least a first for Bruce Brown, if not more, for taking on both of those contracts. So I think that it gets more expensive if you're going to go that route in terms of assets, because those are not going to be viewed as positive assets that you're giving up. So I don't think either one is technically untouchable, but certainly between the two, Austin is a higher priority. They've really empowered him as like the number 3 guy. He's I think grown offensively this season and really taken a couple of big steps. So I think Austin makes a lot more sense like longer term with this group. Rui's the one that I think, if you're being objective, he should be expendable potentially, depending on what happens with Vando. But I just don't know if they completely view it that way. All right, a couple super chats. First one from Michael D. Haven't been able to catch the last few streams. Sad face, but how disappointed are we going 0-3 against these Texas teams? It's a good point. I had thought of it, but forgot to reference it earlier that they went 0-3 against the 3 Texas teams. I appreciate you catching this stream, and it's okay that you missed the last few. I know that the times were weird, and then ultimately there was the gap in the schedule, but I'm glad you're catching this one. It's disappointing because I think another takeaway for me from the last 3 games has been it's felt like playoff intensity basketball, and it's really felt like the Lakers have struggled to find more than like 5 or 6 guys who could hang on the court. And to me, it's really been like in the aggregate of the 3 games, I would say it's been the projected starters of AD, LeBron, DFS, Max, and Austin. Those to me have been the only 5 guys that I feel like have looked like they could hang with some of these teams. Rui hit some shots tonight, but 3 rebounds. Like I just think he continues to, had a couple steals. I thought what was a little bit more active as a helper at times, but he got blown by. This was a tough matchup for him. Dorian, this to me was a regression in terms of his performance. He did not play the way that, like, he hit his first 3 and then I just think wasn't quite right tonight. Cam, I thought, had an awful game, especially offensively. He went 1 for 7, 1 for 4 on threes. He missed 3 layups. Gabe hit some shots, but had 3 turnovers, and I think continues to just be a roller coaster ride. And he got targeted a bit defensively. Jackson really struggled, just had another bad game. And Dalton, I thought, missed some good looks, but defensively had some nice plays, but continues to also be a target. So it's like a lot of these guys just don't look like rotation guys on a good team. And that's a problem for the Lakers. And that to me is right now like the biggest thing of some of these guys have had good stretches, like Cam, obviously earlier in the season. And even recently, I thought it settled into like a nice bench defender role, but I think it is regressed a bit. Gabe was shooting better. He hasn't been as consistent since he came back. Jackson hasn't been good since he came back. Dalton's been in a month plus long shooting slump outside of a few games. And Rui has not been playing as well since DFS arrived. So you've kind of gotten to the point where, like, if I could play 48, the 5 guys who should be starting 48 minutes, like, I would try to do that. Obviously, you can't do that, but the Lakers are really struggling right now to find productive bench minutes, productive bench lineups. And I think it's felt like the rise in competition has really exposed some of the weaknesses with this group, with this roster. And that to me has been the biggest takeaway from the Texas games. And next one from Harry Chinani. AD's natural position is the 4, and that's what he prefers. We need another big who can play with AD for a stretch. Got destroyed in the paint today. No rim protection when AD is out guarding Wemby. That's another element of this, that this is a matchup specific thing where Wemby is such a good shooter that he also just naturally drags AD out. I wonder if in retrospect, like maybe it would have been better to go with more LeBron or Rui on Wemby, especially if he's hanging around the perimeter. Like there are ways to scram switch where basically, like, if he's starting to go post up, you can switch that and have AD rotate over and then have that guy scramble out. You could also double if you're not comfortable with that matchup. But it almost feels like in some ways, I mean, Wemby's going to be able to shoot over anyone. So whether it's AD out there or Rui or LeBron, but almost having a guy who can try and get into his legs and then having AD as the support, that is something to potentially consider. But to your point, like JJ mentioned, not having a low man presence tonight, he felt the help defense, the low man defense was really rough. And I agree. He said it felt like there was too many possessions where there just wasn't someone in the paint or that's the way it looked or that's the way it felt. And I mean, I agree with your point in theory that I just think the issue is JJ has shown he is not really like two big lineups, and the way that he wants to play offense and even defense does not lend itself necessarily to playing two big looks. Now, would he change that if the Lakers go trade for Walker Kessler or Robert Williams or more of an impact big? Potentially, but I think there's still a lack of clarity as to like the actual answer there. And that's the one thing that, because I don't think it's Jackson Hayes. Like, I don't think Jackson Hayes has been playing well enough. Maybe it's Christian Coloco. Maybe it's Christian Wood. He did play well with LeBron and AD last year, but he's still out. And I asked for an update on Christian today, was told there's no update. So the Lakers are still a bit away from having another center option unless they make a trade. And I don't know if Jonas Valanciunas is coming in here and playing all these minutes next to AD with the way JJ likes to play. So that's my read on the situation. In general, I agree with you. And maybe that's more of an off-season conversation of like, what's the best way to play next to AD? Fortunately for the Lakers, if you wait till the offseason to have that conversation, you might have an early summer. But my one thing with this and just in talking to people has been, I think there's a sense that JJ isn't going to want to play that way because he prioritizes more modern principles, and that's not as many two big looks. And again, maybe they can force his hand a bit and go get that player. But I think right now, if the option is play Jackson Hayes next to AD, I don't think he's going to do that. Going to go about 5 to 10 more minutes before I wrap. Charismatic character, Nick Richards is the most likely candidate to get. I would say, I don't know if I'd say he's the most likely candidate, but I have, in trying to kind of think about what the Lakers are going to do in conversations, it does feel like a smaller move might be likelier. Now, we'll see. I think a lot could change between now and the next 3 weeks, but it feels like maybe it ends up being like a second round pick or two for a center and whatever's the best big that they can get for that price. And maybe that is Nick Richards. Maybe that is Jonas Valanciunas. I doubt it's Nikola Vucevic for that price. He's probably going to go for a first, even if it's a protected first. Well, we'll see. Maybe he can go for a couple seconds, but it does seem like it's trending in that direction as of now. Kane Norris, thoughts on Nikola Vucevic for the Lakers potentially? I like the offensive fit. I think the stretch ability, and he's having a career year offensively and from the three-point line. I think the concern is defensively. He does not rate well. He's not a good big from a mobility perspective, but he's also not a rim protector, shot blocker. So that combination, I think, makes him a bit problematic. Like even Jonas Valanciunas, who I think is also not a good defender, you could at least talk me into like he plays with a certain physicality. He's going to take hard fouls. He could guard guys in the post and lean on them and forearm bar them in the post. Vucevic, I have a harder time seeing how he fits in defensively. If it's like as a, like in the backup big minutes, sure. In some shifts again with AD against certain teams, maybe, but it also like, what's the price? If it's a first round pick, and you also have to salary match. So that's potentially Rui. That's potentially Gabe plus like 3 minimum guys or a couple minimum guys, depending on who you put in. So it's a kind of tricky salary to match. Like that's where Robert Williams is much cleaner in terms of salary matching. Jonas Valanciunas, Walker Kessler, Nick Richards, Day'Ron Sharpe. Those guys are all easier to you could do a minimum guy. You could do Gabe plus something for like Robert Williams, Gabe for Valanciunas. But Vucevic is in that zone of 20 plus million where just salary matching is pretty complicated. And that's partly why I think he's an option, but I would probably peg him a little bit lower. Jakob Poeltl is kind of another one, although if you build out a bigger trade with Bruce Brown, maybe you can do that. Harry Chinani, thank you for the second super chat. We'll be in LA in April. Want to watch a live game. Haven't watched a live game since Kobe's last game in 2016. Any way you can help me get a discount on courtside tickets? Sorry, don't mean to offend you. Haha. You are not offending me. I will just say I don't have a plug like that. I don't have to try and get tickets because I get to go for free, fortunately. And then there's been a couple times I've been able to get either discounted or free tickets for my wife, my son, my brother. It's a pretty high bar to clear to get tickets. So I don't have a plug off the top of my head. If I hear of anything in the meantime, I will give you a shout on that. But I don't have a way to get you discounted courtside tickets. But hey, it was worth the ask, right? Okay, Dark Galaxy. Jovan, would you do Rui plus Hayes plus Cam plus 2 second-round picks or Bruce Brown and JHS plus 29 and 31 for Kessler? So we're calling this the all-in trades, right? Because first one I would do Rui, Hayes, Cam, 2 second-round picks for Bruce Brown. I basically view this as Rui plus 2 second-round picks for Bruce Brown, and I would do that personally. I just think at this point, I would trust Bruce Brown more in a playoff rotation. JHS plus 29. I mean, you are keeping Dalton. I'd honestly rather switch in Dalton for one of the 2 first-round picks, but I could be in the minority there. I think it's so much to give up for Kessler. Like, I'd also want to know how JJ is going to use him if he's going back to starting. If he's going to start him, play him 30 minutes a night, and they're going to change the way they play and lean into 2 bigs. I don't think I don't think I would do 2 firsts for Kessler. I would do a swap. I think the most I would give up is a first, a swap, and remove the top 4 protection on 2027. So in a way, that's kind of, it's not exactly 2 firsts, but like, yeah, I don't think I would do 2 firsts. I know there's some people that I think like Crangus is in the camp of do 2 firsts. I think it's too much. Enger, ENGR, any video of Vando doing basketball? Not from the only video we've seen, or the only Vando we've seen has been him doing stationary shooting. Don't have any video of him scrimmaging. Harry Chinani, any thoughts on doing a podcast with your wife and talking about your relationship and life in general, something different? If you guys would be open to that, I don't think I'm going to start like a whole separate channel or podcast, but if you guys would be more interested in like some more personal lifestyle content, I would do that. Bloodhound, I don't want to give up our future. It's fair. I mean, it's fair. I think this Lakers team is just, if you, there's just such a roller coaster that depending on how they're looking, you either want to believe in them or you don't want to believe in them. And that kind of sways it. It might just be how they look the next 3 weeks. Justine Severo, what's the time there, Jovan? It's 5 p.m. here in the Philippines. It's 12:52 a.m., so almost 1 a.m. Dark Galaxy says, I look at trading 2 first-round picks for Kessler as trading 1 first-round pick because Kessler is already a first-round pick. That's fair. Yeah. I have some potential concerns about just ultimately how much they're going to use him. I would assume if you're trading 2 first-round picks, you're going to use him and start him. So I guess by critical theory that would be implied, I guess, that if you're trading that much for him, I still would fight to do a swap or top 4 protection. But I do like Kessler's my number 1 target. I've been saying that. So maybe depending on how the next couple of weeks go, maybe I change my tune. I see Guillermo Barzana. Bruce Brown's playing terrible. He's living on his past performance, the same as Gabe. They're both average players. And there's another Bruce Brown one. I don't know where it went. Madison, Jovan, do you feel the locker room is lost? LA has so many no-show games. It's concerning. I don't think the locker room is lost. I think that's... No, I don't think the locker room is lost. But as I mentioned earlier, the no-shows are concerning. It has been something in the DNA of this group where they roll over in second halves. And I don't think it's like... I mean, DFS... And look, he's the new guy, so he obviously doesn't have the context of the full season. And he also might be, there's always an element of like, you don't want to ruffle feathers or go against the coaching staff. But DFS said tonight, he put it on the players. He did not put it on the coaching staff. He said he thought the coaching staff had a great game plan and they just didn't execute it. They didn't implement it. And he put that more on the players than the coaches. So that's just one player's opinion and make of it what you want. But I don't think it's lost. I don't think they lose 7 in a row, 8 in a row, 9. Like, okay, maybe we have a different conversation, but I don't think they're there right now. Dark Galaxy hits on a point that Kessler is literally the president in the future. I think that's why he's my number 1 target. He doesn't just help. He's 23. Like, he's younger than Dalton. Lloyd, trade for Kessler, Bruce Brown, and Agbaji. We need athletes. I would like all 3 of those guys as additions. And depending on, I mean, you probably are giving up both picks and both second-round picks, but yeah, I mean, I really like Agbaji. Harry Chinani, thank you for being so genuine, which is why I tune into you versus other podcasters. Appreciate you. I appreciate you. And that is the utmost compliment. I've already gone a little bit over, so I'm going to go about 5 more minutes, but keep it to an hour. Braden, hey Jovan, I would have preferred to see Koloko minutes tonight over Hayes. Obviously, hindsight being 2020. Thoughts? Yeah, I said at the time that Hayes came back, I thought Koloko, or right when Hayes came back, that I thought Koloko was outplaying him and deserved to play. Now there are some limitations because of, I'm looking at it. Koloko was inactive tonight because of G League assignment, and there are limitations to how much a 2-way guy can play. I would argue that with Christian Wood being out, this is the time to play Christian Koloko. And with Jackson Hayes struggling, this is the time to play Christian Koloko. That's clearly not been the way that they felt, but I'm with you. I think Koloko, the recent version of Koloko has been better than the recent version of Hayes, to put it simply, and I think he should play over him. Young Park, Jovan, is your son a Laker fan? Yes, I would say he's more of a LeBron fan than a Laker fan, but I've given him some Lakers gear that I've gotten from games and stuff, and he loves wearing it, and yeah, so I would say he's not super into basketball. He's become more into basketball, progressively into basketball, but I'm still trying to win him over. Josh G, just going straight to it. We are just soft. Sometimes, yes. I don't think all the time, but sometimes for sure. Count Zurich, Jovan, why do media people always pepper in kinda, sorta, etc. in their press questions? I think people, you're just trying to qualify and soften the blow, especially if it's a more direct or contentious question. So I'm guilty of it myself. I've tried to, especially kinda on my end, I've tried to eliminate that as best I can when I listen back to myself asking questions. But I think it comes from a place of trying to qualify and not because the thing that it's a fine art in terms of you want to hold people accountable and you want to be direct and honest and truthful, and that's part of being a journalist. At the same time, these are people and they have emotions, they have reactions to the questions you ask, they have emotions to being put on the fire, putting their feet to the fire or putting them on the spot with different things. So it's finding that balance of you got to work with these people on a daily basis, and it is ultimately a working relationship. But I think people, I think people pepper those in just to soften certain questions and make it seem like sometimes they'll add in qualifiers into it of, the defense had a good shift in, the second quarter, but it kind of struggled in the second half. What shifted or what, something like that. And they'll put in kind of like the compliment sandwich it a little bit and then sort of diffuse the harsher part of the question with a qualifier, like a kinda, like a sorta. So I think that's where it comes from. Would you rather have DeJounte Murray or Bruce Brown? I mean, in a vacuum, DeJounte Murray, but they don't make the same amount of money. I mean, I know they're close enough, but I also don't think New Orleans is selling him right now, and they'd want both firsts. Kane Carter, Jovan, what's the biggest misconception of you? I'm not sure. I would say some of the things, this is going to bring up the aggregation. Some of the stuff that people have aggregated, and I've had people reference to me on social media, is just not true. And that's frustrating. I think sometimes people think I said certain things or only know part of what I said, and then they'll hold that against me in the future and say, well, you got this wrong or this or that. And like, that bothers me. I would say maybe the biggest misconception of me is like, I'm actually very shy. And I think in a weird way, like this show and this channel and this podcast, like brings out a more animated, extroverted version of me, which is how I am with like people really close to me. But it's funny because I feel like if you're super close to me, or you're watching me on here, you get one version of me. And then if you're everybody else, I'm far more shy and quiet and just reserved and keep to myself. I'm not a very like animated person. Even on here, I think I'm relatively chiller than some of the other YouTubers, but yeah. K Norris, 5 more minutes, code word for 20 more minutes. I'm trying to wrap in a sec. I just feel like the chat started off a bit slow and now it's picking up. So trying to engage with everybody. Dark Galaxy, why doesn't JJ lean into a shorter rotation? I feel like it works better for them. I agree. And I think they kind of went with a shorter rotation. I mean, they went with 10 guys, but no one, like, only DFS played more than 20 minutes off the bench. Everyone else was in the low to mid teens. So he kind of went with a shorter leash a little bit, but I think it should probably be an 8-man rotation. And I'd probably go starters plus DFS Gabe. And then I'm not sure. Maybe 7. I guess Koloko would be my pick for the 8th guy and probably phase out Cam and Dalton, and Jackson. But they don't have a great option there. Michael D, I'm really against involving Connect in trades. He's an untapped 20 plus point per game developing. I think giving him up would be a mistake in the long run. Certainly possible. I think that is the counter argument to trading Dalton. I think it just comes down to like, would you rather have the pick in the future or would you rather have Dalton? And maybe you think Dalton's more valuable than that pick. And that's assuming that the Lakers are making a bigger trade, taking a bigger swing. Harry Chinani, how long does it take for you to get to crypto from where you live? On the way there, it's about 25, 30 minutes. On the way back, it's about 15 minutes. Kane Carter, Jovan, are there any players or coaches you were cool with, but your relationship with them got worse as the season went on? I mean, I would say Darvin last year. We had a good relationship, and then I reported that the locker room was starting to turn on him in January with Shams, and that did not go well. Kane Carter, Jovan, have you ever had interesting run-ins with players you didn't have a good relationship with? Yes. I've been threatened over text by a player. I've been confronted at a press conference by a player. I've been called certain names by players in locker room tunnels. I just report the truth and what I hear. So like oftentimes it's more the behind the scenes stuff that I report on certain guys, and then I don't know. I guess I ruffle feathers. Maybe that's another misconception about me. I don't like ruffling feathers, but I tend to do that. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. Jovan, thanks for the hard work and be safe. Thank you, Keon. I appreciate that. You be safe as well. And I appreciate the super chat. Ken Carter, Jovan, what arena has the best food? Little Caesars in Detroit. They have an incredible dessert spread. They cater Little Caesars, so you get unlimited pizza and multiple types of pizzas. They also have like salads and stuff if you want to eat healthier, but just I would say that New York gives you a voucher. Well, you actually got to pay for the voucher, but New York is up there because their concourse is great in terms of food options. You pay for a voucher to then go use it at one of the concourse spots. Minnesota is really good. They have a nice setup. I missed the Utah game. I heard Utah this year is really good. Phoenix is up there as well. And then LA is always up there too. They have one of the best ice cream machines in the world, or in the league at least. Dark Galaxy, has DFS changed the vibe of the locker room? A little bit. Like I think he fits in well with Vando and with Cam. Like he's kind of, all three of those guys kind of got like that junkyard dog type like vibe and personality. So I think he's fit in well with those guys. He took D'Lo's old locker for what it's worth. He's in the corner next to AD. Jay, no, I would go after Alonzo again. I'm leaning that way too. He's climbing up my rankings. No username 12. Why is Rui still starting? I think JJ clearly likes him, right? And has a certain level of trust. He's talked about how coachable he's been. So maybe that's one of his blind spots. I think now though we have a sample size of they've lost 3 in a row. They're 5-5 with this current starting lineup, and DFS has been outplaying Rui since the trade. So I don't think it'll be much longer, but for now, yeah. Lloyd Avenue, Jovan, if you need a bodyguard, I'm available. I appreciate you. Note who's threatening 6'5" Jovan must have been a forward or bigger. It's actually typically been smaller players who threaten me, for what that's worth. Dark Galaxy, Lakers Nation has your back over Darvin. I appreciate that. Randiculous idea for Buha's block guest. Brez, Geeter, Trudell, Ali. Never seen any of them on other pods. I'm actually going to be with, I believe it's going to be Brez and Geeter tomorrow for Spectrum. So I will bring that up. Trudell, I know that some limitations there because of working for the team technically, but the other three I think might be easier to get, and I think that would be awesome. Justine Severo, worst food. I would say Charlotte has the worst food. There's been like twice I've gone there. They didn't have water. Actually, I think in general, they don't have water in their media room. And then you have to go give you a little thing, like a voucher, but then also the water there, if you get it from the concourse, they make you take the cap off. And it sounds like a small thing, but we're often like rushing from our seats and we're going upstairs and like we're carrying our laptop and stuff. So having an open water while you're doing all those things can spill, or you bump into someone and spill it on them. So like, it's not ideal to be running around an arena with an open water bottle. So I would probably say Charlotte off the top of my head. Young Lido, Jovan, have you heard anything about Karis LeVert? He's in the last year of his contract. I've not, and I would just point to like Cleveland is a contender. I don't think they're just going to give him up. Glenn S. Jovan, if the Lakers don't make a trade for a big, how does the buyout market look? Jackson Hayes ain't it. Unfortunately, at this point, Koloko should just get signed. I agree with the last part. I think this is the way things are looking. Unless they get that center, it's probably converting Koloko, but we'll see. Lloyd Avenue, is Cam Johnson out of the picture? Not 100%, but I think teams rarely make two big trades with each other in the same trade period. Dark Galaxy, if DFS isn't starting by next game, we riot. That's what it feels like. That is what it feels like from the fan base. Corey B. Jovan, how many times have you made LeBron mad with articles that you've written about him? If so, has he ever said anything to you about it? No, I mean, not to my knowledge. And there hasn't been much to criticize LeBron with. Like, I think this year I've been a little bit more critical with the turnovers and some of the body language stuff, especially around like the Miami time period, like that loss. But in general, I don't think there's been much to criticize him for. Kane Norris, appreciate the content, Jovan, watching you from New Zealand, bro. Shout out to the late night gang. Shout out to everyone watching in other places. I will go with... Okay, I'm going to do 3 more questions, then I'm wrapping as I went over 20 minutes as expected. Kane Carter, what advice would you give the college grads looking for a job? I assume you're talking about journalism and not just any job, because it's going to be different depending on general advice versus specific. I would say if you are trying to do what I do and what others do, whoever you look up to in the industry, first and foremost, like, start creating content. And you just need a phone, and even then you could have a webcam and do it. But create a YouTube channel, create a podcast, start writing, get better on camera, get better with your writing, get better with your editing, and just figure out what you like. Because that's been a progression for me. Is like, for the longest time I thought I wanted to do just writing, or like writing was going to be the main thing. And the past year I've had some thoughts and looking out at my future, I feel like it's more here with YouTube and podcasting, and like writing. Writing still is a big part of my job, but like and is technically my main job. But moving forward, I think it's I'm leaning more, I think, towards this. So I think you have to figure out what you want to do. So that's the biggest thing. Number two would probably be move to a city, and this is a more out there one, but it just is what it is. Like move to an NBA city or a city with a team that you can cover, or an athlete, depending on what sport you want to cover. But I think that the barrier to entry to get a credential is actually lower than some people think, especially if you're offering to work for a blog or provide free labor or low cost labor for a company. You can get, I think, a credential, and that's really the next step, is getting the credential, getting the access, starting to make connections, both with players and coaches, but also within the industry, and showing that you do good work. And you do those two things, you just work at it, do it on your own. You don't need the company or the whatever. Like, you could just create your own content, and then you also put yourself in a position where you can be in the city covering the team. That combination, I think that's the way to make it in 2025. I've talked about this before, Kane, but to summarize it, do you feel players are more emotional towards criticism these days versus 10 or so years ago? Yes, I think they are. Lloyd Ave, we love you, man. Best show out there. Thank you. I appreciate it. Alex, GTA 6 is coming out soon. Will Vando or Christian Wood be back before GTA 6? We shall see. J Note, like the video, everyone. Thank you, J Note. Justine Severo, 20K subs by the end of the week guaranteed. I hope so. I hope that is the goal. Harry Chinani, how about getting into sports journalism outside the U.S.? That I don't know how well the industry works outside the U.S., so I'm coming at it relatively blind. But I would say I think similar things apply, where you can create your own content on social platforms, and you could create a blog. You could still create a YouTube channel. You could create a podcast. You could create social clips for Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, whatever is the social platforms in your country. And then also, whatever is the big sports team, the big basketball team that's closest to you. If you can move there or commute to those games and start covering them, I think that's the way to do it. Dark Galaxy, nothing really new today. I mean, it's been a weird time. Like, it's a lot of the conversation hasn't been about basketball with everyone. I'll end on this one because I'll end on this one. A little positive note to end the show. Kane Carter, Jovan, when did you meet your wife, and how long did it take for you to pop the question? How did the proposal go? I met my wife in late 2019, literally one of the last few days, December 27th. And that was our first date. And we dated for a few months, and then something called COVID happened, as you all are I'm sure, well aware. And we had this sort of make or break moment of, do we move in together? Because at the time, obviously, when everything first happened, we didn't know how long it was going to be. And you weren't supposed to be around other people. And it was like, you can only be around the people you're in the same space with and whatever. So we decided to move in together basically like 3 months in. And it was that sink or swim moment. And we swam, and we got through COVID together. And then it was about a year and 8 months in when I popped the question. We went on a Europe trip. She's German, half Serbian. So we did a big trip, Amsterdam, Germany, Serbia, France, And then at the end of the trip, we closed it out in Paris, and I proposed in front of the Eiffel Tower. And it was an awesome moment, went exactly as I had hoped for. Felt like one of those like movie moments that you feel like you're not going to experience in your life. And I was fortunate enough to. So popped a question about a year and a half in, but if you fact, like, I felt like a month in quarantine with someone almost felt like 6 months with someone. So I kind of joke, like, we were together for a year and 8 months, but it felt like we were together for like 5 years before I popped the question. And then we were engaged for 3 years before we got married. So it ended up still being a long time. All right, I'm going to wrap here. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. As a reminder, I will be back tomorrow with a new episode of Buha's Block. I will also be on Spectrum at 7 p.m. Pacific time, so be on the lookout for that, especially if you get Spectrum. Check me out on there. And yeah, that'll do it for tonight. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. Let's get those likes up. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow. I will talk to you then.